In this new video, I've got 10 specially selected quotations for you from Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility, which lend themselves brilliantly in terms of being weaved into a unseen critical appreciation. I'm going to help you learn them, and I'm going to explain how you might use them in one of these critical appreciations. It's going to be fabulous. It's going to help you get that A star. Stay tuned. This is Schofield on Shakespeare.
Abbiamo il cuore a strisce.
Eleanor required greater certainty of Edward's feelings to make Marianne's conviction of their attachment agreeable to her. This quotation highlights the uncertainty of the courting, loving if she is lucky female. In Austen's novels, marriage is crucial for so many female characters, particularly for financial but also social reasons. These women are unable to propose themselves or be seen as too forward. They have to behave with a degree of restraint and propriety, yet somehow give an indication to the man of their feelings and desires. Thus, in the early stages of the novel, Eleanor is left feeling horribly uncertain. She senses a growing rapport and understanding between herself and Edward, yet the latter has not taken any formal steps which would categorically confirm to her that he is planning to propose marriage. This quotation would be useful in an essay exploring female passivity. A correspondence between Lucy and Edward by letter could subsist only under a positive engagement. This quotation gives an insight into the very strict rules of courtship during Austen's time. If single men and single women corresponded, it could mean only one thing: engagement. Such rules were theoretically intended to protect the honour of the female, and to break these rules could potentially have disastrous consequences for the female in terms of her reputation. Maggie Lane's book, Jane Austen's World, contains some detailed points about the very strict rules surrounding courtship. Do read these through again if you haven't already. Lady Middleton had celebrated her marriage by giving up music. This splendid quotation highlights the depressing limitations of a proper woman's education, summarised so succinctly by Caroline Bingley in Pride and Prejudice as resulting in a thorough knowledge of music, singing, drawing, dancing, and the modern languages. Forget about making them more intelligent or providing a lifetime of joy and interest. A woman's education was geared up unequivocally towards attracting a husband. Upon her marriage, any accomplishments acquired after so many years can then immediately be discarded. Note Austen's ironic tone here. There is the positive but misleading verb celebrate, which is subsequently followed by giving up music. Over the mantelpiece still hung a landscape in coloured silks of Charlotte's performance, in proof of her having spent years at a great school in town to some effect. One painting appears to be the only significant consequence of 7 years of education. Again, we see evidence of Austen's ironic tone in the use of lavish praise. The production of the painting is a performance, and she has been at a great school, to describe such a narrow, limited final outcome. She knew that the blunder of marrying a woman beautiful but silly was too common for any sensible man to be lastingly hurt by it. Here we see an illustration of the fact that the majority of marriages during Austen's time were unlikely to be about a romantic meeting of true minds and temperaments, notwithstanding the triumphant unions of Eleanor and Edward in Sense and Sensibility and Darcy and Elizabeth in Pride and Prejudice. As well as being heavily influenced by the woman's finances and social position, many men would also prioritise beauty ahead of sense, much to the detriment of Mr. Palmer's here and Mr. Bennet's in Pride and Prejudice's daily lives. The strange unsuitableness which often existed between husband and wife. Of course, marriage during Austen's time did not prioritise suitability between husband and wife. Would it perhaps have come forth on the unconscious list of the courting male behind money, social position, and looks? The lady, I suppose, has no choice in the affair? Here, Eleanor is making a wry observation about the fact that Miss Morton will apparently be available to marry Robert Ferrars, having previously been felt by the family of being the perfect wife for Edward. Note John Dashwood's astonished exclamation and question following Eleanor's implicit suggestion that Miss Morton's opinion on who she marries might have some value. But no, John goes on to say, certainly there can be no difference, for Robert will now to all intents and purposes be considered as the eldest son, and as to anything else, they are both very agreeable young men. I do not know that one is superior to the other. In other words, for John Dashwood at least, marriage is solely about consolidating and advancing social and financial position. What else could possibly matter? Miss Grey's money was necessary to me. Here we have a naked assertion from, at least he's been honest, Willoughby. He has arrived late at night, all hot and bothered and drunk, after hearing that Marianne could possibly be dying. The reasons for him marrying Miss Grey was simple. Her money, £50,000, was necessary to fund his extravagant, self-serving, selfish lifestyle. This £50,000 alone would result in a yearly income for the couple of £2,500, £500 more than Colonel Brandon, and this is before we take any account of the possibility of Willoughby ultimately inheriting his aunt's estate, Allenham. Ka-ching! Domestic happiness is out of the question. Willoughby whines to a surprisingly receptive Eleanor. Well, this is what can happen within a society in which marriage is the principal means for securing financial security. It would be better for her to marry you than be single, reflects Eleanor, as she muses on the fact that Lucy maintained her engagement to Edward in spite of him being disinherited by his mother. But the broader maxim remains true for nearly all women. Irrespective of personal inclination, or even, dare I say it, sexuality, it is always better to marry than be single. But of course, it's not enough to know contextual quotations. You must be able to embed them seamlessly. So, which of the previous 10 contextual quotations would provide additional insight into the extract on screen here from Celeste Ng's Everything I Never Told You? Read it through now to consider. While the passage focuses on women's choices in education being limited, Marilyn wants to do design technology, but is not permitted. So it would make sense to include one of the contextual quotations about women and education. For instance, over the mantelpiece still hung a handscape in coloured silks of Charlotte's performance, in proof of her having spent 7 years at a great school in town to some effect. Part of her response might read, the passage highlights the challenges experienced by women in terms of being able to pursue their own educational passions. Marilyn is desperate to study design technology and is clearly intelligent. She had been at the top of her class, girls and boys, since the 6th grade. However, in spite of her excellence and superior ability to both genders, the head teacher refuses her request after apparently listening to her and understanding. He nodded and smiled as she made her case. This depressing exchange highlights the fact that as recently as 1952, women still did not have equality of opportunity in education. In the previous century, women in literature texts frequently suggested that a woman's education should be predominantly about producing pretty and decorative things, e.g. songs, sewing and painting. Hence, Charlotte Palmer's performance of a landscape in coloured silks following 7 years at a great school. This is not the case within this extract, in which Marilyn has clearly been studying a broader range of subjects, given that she has been ranked above both girls and boys. Nonetheless, the principal's failure to countenance Marilyn's request to study design technology, in spite of her anticipating his arguments, it was the same class period, her schedule wouldn't be disrupted, highlights residual unfairness of opportunity within schools in the 1950s. Another chance to practice, chums, pupils, subscribers. Which of the previous 10 contextual quotations would provide additional insight into the extract on screen here from Kate Chopin's The Story of an Hour? Read it through now to consider. Well, this passage focuses on a widow's feelings of being liberated following the death of her husband. And so we might include this quotation: the strange unsuitableness which often existed between husband and wife. Now, of course, we don't know from this single paragraph exactly why the widow is feeling so strangely euphoric following the death of her husband. We would need to read more of the rest of the extracts. But based on this paragraph, we might write: the passage shows a widow struggling to contain her feelings of relief and euphoria following the death of her husband. Whilst recognising the taboo-shattering nature of her reaction, she nonetheless cannot stop herself repeating the phrase free, 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 with no reason given for these feelings. Given that the extract was published in 1894, it is tempting to assume that some of her relief may stem from being released from a marriage in which there was little genuine compatibility, or, in the words of the narrator from Sense and Sensibility, a strange unsuitableness between husband and wife. In the 19th century, marriages tended to focus more on securing or advancing social and financial status, rather than considering too deeply whether husband and wife are likely to get along famously. Within this context, Mrs. Mallard's relief is more understandable. She would no longer have to spend all her time with someone she predominantly married just because it was the done thing.
Oh, hello there. This has been a Schofield on Shakespeare production, giving you 10 Jane Austen Sense&Sensibility quotations for your Women in Literature Unseen critical appreciations. Learn them, and many thanks for watching.